Now the poem describes a fictional conversation between James Connolly and Patrick Pearse, who were the leaders of the 1916 Easter Rising. So it is a conversation. The two leaders are talking to each other. That is why it is brief, and that is why that is how Yeats is giving us the opinion of these leaders and the point of view of these leaders for what they had done, for the sacrifices that they had given for their country, or for the steps that they took. And they are saying that they are willing to give their own lives to see the restoration of an island governed by the Irish. So this is the whole theme of the poem, that they reaffirm that they were ready to give up their own lives to restore the freedom, to make Ireland an independent country and governed and ruled by Irish people rather than by the British government. The overt symbolism, there is also an implicit meaning in the poem, and that overt symbolism is that of Christ's crucifixion. That Ireland will be resurrected anew if they spill their blood for it. So Yeats is spurning out, is elaborating their philosophy that Ireland, the country, needs their blood. The country needs their sacrifices if they want independence. So if they want their own country to be born again, to be resurrected, to be reborn. So this is this complex imagery that employs. Ireland is shown as a country which is dead now, as it is ruled by the foreign powers, by the imperial powers. So it is compared to a dead country. And he says in order for it to be resurrected, in order for it to be reborn, it needs blood. It needs the sacrifices of its own people. So this is the brief summary of the poem. Let us now look at the text itself. The first stanza. And you see the first stanza, the first few lines, they begin directly with a quotation of one of the leaders. "Oh, words are lightly spoken," it is with inverted commas, said Pearse to Connolly. So Pearse, Patrick Pearse, is speaking to James Connolly first. So Pearse is saying, "Oh, words are lightly spoken. Maybe a breath of poetic words has withered our rose tree. Or maybe but a wind that blows across the bitter sea." The poem apparently is simple, the language is simple, but you shall see that as is the method with Yeats, he employs complex symbols, he employs complex imagery, and it is the beauty is to understand those images, to understand those symbols in order to truly understand the meaning of the poem. He says, "Oh, words are lightly spoken." The words here refer to the promises being made, to the verbal promises that the British government had made to the Irish parliamentarians, the promises that it had given to them before the war, that they would be granted self-rule at the end of the war. Or maybe Yeats may be referring to other promises made by the British government for the Irish people. But he says, so words are lightly spoken. The words have no worth. The words seem to fade away. The words seem not to have carry any importance or any significance. And then he says, maybe a breath of poetic words has withered our rose tree. Now, rose tree is also the title of the poem. He says, maybe these words, these politic words, as he called them. So politic words here refers to the words which are not sincere, the words which are not honest, the words which are only diplomatic in nature. And so he says maybe these words or this dialogue, this talk, this has withered our rose tree. Rose tree here is a symbol of Ireland. It stands for Ireland. And the title of the poem, The Rose Tree, actually means Ireland. So the poem is about Ireland. The poem is dedicated to Ireland. So he says it is this dialogue, this false, dishonest, and not true. This kind of dialogue, this kind of talk, this kind of discussion, this has withered. This has caused this our beautiful land to wither. It has caused this beautiful country to come to this point, and it has resulted in the decay of our country, of this beautiful country, which he symbolizes and he compares to a rose tree. The rose tree creates an image for us of a beautiful tree, a tree, a tree like a bush, having dark green leaves, lovely dark green leaves, and having bright red flowers amongst those leaves. So he creates this beautiful image for us, for his beautiful country. But then he mixes the two colors. He's contrasting the bright red with the bright green. And remember, green is the color of Ireland and the national color of Ireland. And it was in the previous poem also, in the Easter Rising 1916, that he talked about the green color. And he said that from that uprising onward, whenever green will be worn, it will serve as a reminder of the efforts or the sacrifices of these people that they made on the Easter 1916. So he says maybe this false talk, this dishonest dialogue or false promises, they have resulted in this decay. Our leaders and our citizens, they believed in the false promises of the British rulers. But he says, and what is the result? The result is that our country has decayed. Our country is destroyed right before our eyes, and there is little we've done about it. Or maybe but a wind that blows across the bitter sea. So first he blames this withering of the rose tree, or this withering or decaying of his country, to the politic words or to the false promises. And then in the last two lines, he's blaming it on the wind. So he talks about another symbol now. He's talking about a wind. He says, maybe it is this warm wind, and maybe it is this warm, bitter wind that is blowing across this bitter sea. He calls it a bitter sea because it is a sea through which England has been able to dominate Ireland. He says that this wind, this warm, harsh wind that comes from the direction of England and that passes across the sea, and it reaches our country, and it causes the withering, the decay of our country, because it with it, when it comes, it takes back all that the country has to offer, all the riches of the country. So he's using these two symbols. He uses different symbols, and he uses them to show to us that the country is decaying, that Ireland is being affected, that Ireland and the condition of the Irish citizens and its people, that's being destroyed, and they are suffering more and more as a result of this dominance of England. So we see that the rose tree is an important symbol in this poem, and he talks about it and introduces it in the very first stanza. The rose becomes a symbol of resurrection and Ireland here. So in this stanza we saw how rose was a symbol of Ireland, because he's referring to it as Ireland, as a country which is withering and which is being destroyed because of the false promises, firstly, and secondly, due to the wind that blows across the seas and destroys the plants, and it withers the rose plant. So in this stanza, the rose is a symbol of Ireland, but we shall see in the next stanza that this rose, it becomes a symbol of resurrection. In stanza 2 he says, "It needs to be what watered," James Connolly replied. Now James is replying to what P.S. had said earlier on in the first stanza. James says, it needs to be watered. P.S. had described the situation in Ireland. He had described the pathetic condition of Irish people. But Connolly is now offering solution. He says it needs to be watered. He says the plant is withering because of the harsh wind that is blowing through our country. He says the rose plant is withering, so it needs water to make the green come out again and spread on every side and shake the blossom from the bud to be the garden's bride. Now he says we need to water the plant if we want the green to come out again, if we want this withering to stop, if we want the green to come out again. Also means, because remember the green is a symbol, national color of Ireland. So he says in order for our country, in order for England to be, in order for Ireland to be known all across the globe, to be spread, if we want our country's name to be spread across the globe, spread on every side, if we want the green to come out again, if we want Ireland to be reborn, to be born again, and to be known to the world as a separate, independent country, and if we want to shake the blossom from the bud, bud, you know, is the unopened, not yet opened, the newly formed flower. So he says if we want the flower to blossom from that blood, from that bud, we need to water the plant. So in order for the green to come out, in order for to make Ireland proud amongst the other nations and other countries, and to make it blossom, to make it spread its fragrance, and to make it spread its beauty all over the globe, he says, and to make it the garden's bride. The garden may be a symbol here of this earth, and he says if we want to make it the pride, a proud country amongst the other countries or nations of this world, we have to water the plant. We have to water it. We have to restore its energy. We have to restore its life. So the country is like that rose tree or plant. It is drying up and it is dying, but only water, it can restore its health. Water can give it back its life and its vitality and its pride. The most important thing is its pride, its name amongst the independent countries around the world. And that is what they were trying to accomplish. Then in the last stanza, Pierce says to Connolly, but where can we draw water? Now the problem is that they don't know where to get that water from, which will revive, give life to the rose tree. When all the wells are parched away, he says, when all the wells are parched away, there's no water in the wells are thirsty themselves, they are empty, there's no water in the wells. Now the wells here may also be symbolic. The wells are maybe the symbols of the leaders, the Irish leaders or the Irish elite in Ireland, who were casual and callous and who were selfish and who were not able to lead the country out of those the troubles that they had. So he says when all the wells are also parched away, they are empty, they don't have nothing to offer. They have nothing to offer. They have nothing to give to this country. Oh, plain as plain can be. There's nothing but our own red blood can make a right rose tree. And then the conclusion that he makes is, since there is no water, he says we can only make the right rose tree by giving our own red blood. We know that blood is red in color. Red is the color of the blood, of the human blood, and there are no two opinions about it. But still Yeats emphasizes this red color of the blood. He says there's nothing but our own red blood. He could have said there's nothing but our own blood, and we know that blood carries a red color, but he wants to emphasize the redness. He wants to emphasize the red color because he says he's talking about the sacrifice here. Red is a symbol of love, true, but red is also the symbol of sacrifice. So he says it would be through our own sacrifices. It is by spilling our own blood. It would be by reddening this earth. It would be by offering our own blood to this sacred plant, to this sacred special country, our country, Ireland, that we can make the right rose tree, or we can make the proud Ireland. So he, through these three stanzas, Yeats has used images, but those images are symbols. So they become complex symbols because each of the image that he uses, it refers about something related with Ireland, related with the country. So when you interpret the poem, you will interpret the poem literally. One is a literal interpretation of the poem, where wells are wells and where blood is blood, where the rose tree is rose tree. But the other is a deeper and the symbolic interpretation of the poem, where all these images, they become symbolic, and they represent on the political front of Ireland, and on the and considering the social situation of Ireland, they represent a deeper thought. They represent the ground realities in Ireland. So the poem, in fact, not just this poem, but all poems of Yeats are to be read on these two levels, on the literal, on the surface level, and then there is the deeper connotations, or the deeper meaning has to be understood. The symbols have to be dug in, and they have to be understood, because with them lies the true meaning of the poem. Without those, the meaning of the poem is irrelevant, is meaningless. So very simple, short poem we saw, but with the use of complex imagery and complex symbols, Yeats is able to achieve a unity, a harmony, and he is able to give reassurance, and he is able to give tribute to the sacrifices of the leaders and of the people of Ireland, who were ready to lay down their own lives for the sake of their own country. And here he seems to accept, and there is no ambivalent attitude here, because he says that the country needs their blood, the country needs their sacrifices. So now there is all this double thinking, that whether the laying down of the lives was needed or not. There are no two opinions here. He seems to be saying through the mouth of James Connolly and Patrick Pearse, that the blood is needed, that sacrifices are needed if the country is to seek independence from England. And the poem, as you can see, evokes many themes. There are references to many things, the references to Irish folklore, references to spirituality, to the unrequited love, and Ireland's struggle for independence. These are the different planes on which the story can be read. When we discussed the poem, we discussed it as the Ireland's struggle for independence, and the need for sacrifices, the need for spilling of the blood for the country. But the poem also evokes the Irish folklore. In the Irish folklore, in the Irish myths, the rose tree is an important symbol, and it is an important symbol of resurrection. So Yeats is incorporating that into the poem. The poem is also has got this spiritual atmosphere, because we see that he's talking about he's creating the image of crucifixion, and how he does that. Crucifixion, we see that when he's talking about spilling the blood, the red blood, in the last stanza, he is automatically creating before us this, the image of the sacrifice of Jesus Christ. Christ also laid down his own life for for all mankind, for the sins of all mankind. He took up upon himself the burden of all mankind according to the Christian belief, and he laid down his own life. He spilled his own blood, and this sacrifice was accepted by the Lord, and humanity was forgiven. Mankind was forgiven. So it is this image of Christ's crucifixion that is created in the last stanza, that gives the poem a spiritual kind of atmosphere, and a spiritual a meaning is also apparent in the poem. And another theme can be that of the unrequited love. If you read it literally, the poem may also be exploring how, because Yeats suffered from this unrequited love in his own personal life also. I did talk about in the previous lecture when I told you that this girl Maud Gonne, a nationalist also, whom Yeats was madly in love with and had also proposed to her thrice, but every time she turned down his offer, and she married another nationalist, but her marriage with him was also not successful, and after a year or two that marriage ended. But Yeats always, for a long time felt that his love was unrequited, that it was not fulfilled. He never got it back. He loved, it was a one-sided love. So the theme of unrequited love can also be traced through the poem, because this flower here, rose, I told you also, is a symbol both of sacrifice and of love. So we can take it as a symbol of love, where it is love which is not returned, and love which is not consumed. So he may be expressing that kind of love, but love for his beloved, but also love for his country. So he says he may be saying that he needs to do more. He needs to make sacrifices to get the attention of his beloved, or he needs to give sacrifices for the love of his country in order to make it alive again. So we can trace these other numerous themes in the poem, because Yeats is employing symbols, and when symbols are used, there can be multiple interpretations of the poem, and this is the beauty of the 20th century poets. Their works are highly symbolic, and the interpretations can be various, and the reader, he is moved in different directions. But the major focus, I'm sure you would agree, the major focus of the poem was on the Irish struggle for independence, because this was a dialogue between the two Irish leaders who had offered their own lives, given up their own lives, and who had given sacrifice for the sake of their country. So that remains the major and the most powerful theme of the poem. Yeats helped lead Irish Renaissance that sought to restore the influence of Gaelic language and culture on Irish literature. I felt that you need to keep that in mind here also, because Yeats, and I mentioned in it in the previous lecture also, so I'd like it to be reinforced, that this Irish Renaissance, this revival of new kind of literature, is for that Ireland is indebted to Yeats. So he was trying to restore the Gaelic language and culture on Irish literature. So if we see that is why we see all these cultural images or symbols being used in his poem, because his main focus was to revive the Irish culture, and this was in line with the political movement, because on the political front they were seeking an independent status for Ireland, and on the culturally also they wanted to show to the world that Ireland is a separate entity with its own culture, separate from England.